Sorry.
Oliver Tatum, Deschutes County Fire District Number 2, and Sundance Firewise.
Robin Church, Firewise Coordinator for Three Pines. Summit West Neighborhood District Emergency Preparedness Lead and Secretary Project Wildfire Neighborhood Coalition.
Kevin Moriarty, Deschutes County Forester.
And I'm Corinne Heiner, Deschutes County Natural Resources Specialist. So, Kevin, did you comment? No? I'm sure.
Just an announcement on that fall fuel reduction grant that's coming up here September 1st. We do have the info page already on our natural resources website, so that kind of just gives you the general information about the grant. If you applied for this grant prior to this year, you're probably pretty familiar with that. But basically it's $125,000 that we have in funding. It is a community grant, so we're only giving this out to, it's not a grant for individual homeowners. And we do prioritize Firewise communities for this grant. Not that you wouldn't be eligible if you weren't, but there's only a limited amount of funding. The grant primarily is for defensible space projects and community protection. So there's lots of eligibility with that. It's mostly for vegetation management, but we do we will accept projects like replacing mulch with gravel or fixing screens, a few things like that. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Lauren Street. And the grant will be live September 1st. So there will not be any application that you can click on until September 1st. So that's all I had on that.
Okay. And then we just did kind of a full overhaul on the Project Wildfire website. And we combined the Fire Free website into the Project Wildfire website, so that won't be a standalone site. So if you want to go check it out, some new stuff in there. We got like the calendar and some information about the Project Wildfire Coalition. And then I have, if anyone has anything they would like shared in the next Project Wildfire newsletters, send it my way. That'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks. Right. So this morning we have Emily Troisi. She is the director of the Fire Adapted Communities Network, and she's going to be talking to us and doing a little presentation on what FACNet does.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Corinne. Thank you for the invite to be here this morning. I'm going to get my screen pulled up. I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to be here because I have such a special place in my heart for Project Wildfire. I've been working with Project Wildfire, engaging some way in Deschutes County since I first started with the network back in 2014. Originally, I was working with Ed and Allison, and then Boone, and now Corinne, and have had the fortune of also working with Nathan Garibay from Deschutes OEM a little bit more over the recent years. So my presentation today is a little bit about FACNet, who we are, framing around us and some of our history. I went backwards in some of my files and pulled out some of the work that we've done with Project Wildfire over the years. And it was really great to look back and see just the history and the deep partnership that we've had. And I thought that would be fun to share a little bit about today as well. And then at the end, I'm going to share a little bit about current opportunities at FACNet and hopefully save a little time for discussion about how else the network can support Project Wildfire and efforts in Deschutes County for community wildfire resilience. I'm going to try to drop some things in the chat as I go. But if I don't get to it, I will be sure to follow up and drop some links in after I'm done speaking. I do welcome folks to input questions in the chat as well as I go. And like I said, I'll try to save some time at the end for questions and discussion. So again, my name is Emily Troisi. I am the director for the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network. I am currently based in Swannanoa, North Carolina, which is a little town in the mountains in Western North Carolina, outside of Asheville. And I've been with the network for almost 11 years now. I've served many roles, worn many hats, and on the side, I work in emergency management. So I worked for Boulder Office of Emergency Management when I lived in Colorado for about 6 years, and I have a passion for community wildfire resilience and disaster resilience. So thank you again for inviting me to be here. So the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network is part of a system of other networks that we lovingly refer to as the fire networks. So if you've heard of the Fire Learning Network, the TREXs or Prescribed Fire Training Exchanges, or the Indigenous Peoples Burning Network, we are all part of the same family of networks. So I've dropped a link in the chat to learn a little bit more about that partnership. Some of the networks have been around for a really long time. So for example, FLN has been around for over 20 years. And FACNet's been around for, gosh, about 12, going on 13 now. And Indigenous Peoples Burning Network is a little bit newer. I want to say maybe six years old or so. We are mostly funded by a partnership with the U.S. Forest Service and DOI. We do have some private funding, state funding, and other funding partners as well. The Nature Conservancy has the prime agreement with our federal partners, and then they partner with the Watershed Research and Training Center, which is the organization that I work for, and some other entities like University of California Cooperative Extension to steward some of the other networks in our system. As you can see, we're nationwide. We've got a lot of dots and landscapes all over the place, and we really are focused on community wildfire resilience and resilient landscapes across the United States. We do have some network members in Canada. There are TREXs in other parts of the world as well, but primarily our focus is on the United States. Here's just another view of kind of the organization of our group. You can see the Fire Networks partnership at the top with the agencies and the Nature Conservancy. Over on the right-hand side is the Watershed Center. Again, that's the organization that stewards the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network. And then University of California Cooperative Extension, Lania Quinn Davidson helps to run the WTREXs. So we're a large partnership, a large staff, and we all work towards the goal of serving our network members. FACNet has currently about 500 members now. We've got 4 state networks. We're in, I think it's actually 33 states now. We have been around for about, 12 years. So a little bit more about the Fire Adapted Communities Network. We really were started by practitioners for practitioners. Our goal is to help share innovation and practices and support strategic planning and support capacity building for communities that are working on some aspect of community wildfire resilience. You can call it fire adapted communities, you can call it something else, but if you're working on adapting your community to living better with wildfire, we want you to be part of our network. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat to FACNet, as well as the Watershed Center, which is the backbone organization that stewards the network. I'll share a little bit later about some of the specific offerings that we have, but overall, the network really tries to be responsive to the needs of wildfire practitioners. So we work with fire departments, our C&Ds, local state agencies, offices of emergency management, local nonprofits, and others who are trying to do community-wide wildfire adaptation work and work on some element of community wildfire resilience. We started way back in the day with a network membership of probably about 25 people from around the country, that, including Project Wildfire, that were really invested in unpacking what does fire adapted communities mean? What does that look like in practice? How do we develop this job? 10 years ago, there wasn't necessarily fire adapted communities coordinators. As we're kind of really starting to come out of the woodworks, there's not a specific career pathway or training opportunity to become a FAC coordinator or a WUI coordinator. So we were trying to bring people who are working on this around the country together to say, what does your work look like? What does your job look like? What gaps and training needs do you have? What funding and capacity building needs do you have? What kind of partners are you engaging? What does this work look like in your place? So that was really kind of the foundation of the network, and it's expanded and grown over the years to meet the need of the many communities that are facing a challenge of trying to live better with wildfire. So to take a step back, I'm sure everybody in this room is probably familiar with fire adapted communities as a framework, but I'll just reiterate a couple key points just in case, because it's really central to the work that we do at FACnet. Fire adapted communities really came out of the cohesive strategy. It's one of the 3 tenets, along with resilient landscapes and safe and effective wildfire response. And through working with practitioners, FACnet helped to create this graphic that attempts to be kind of a framework for community wildfire resilience. FAC as a concept is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not a roadmap. There isn't a checklist or something that a certificate that you receive at the end. It really is a framework and kind of an organizing concept to help you think about the different tenets that you can be working on in your place to live better with wildfire. In the inner circle, we've got these different buckets. So landscape treatments, public health, prevention, et cetera. Those are kind of the bins or the large topics that you might want to work on and tackle within your community. And then the green outer circle are some examples of tangible programs or projects or tasks that you might want to work on. Those outside green bullets are not designed to be comprehensive or all of the things that you could do necessarily in that bucket. Some of them might weave between 2 different buckets, but we've seen this be a good way to help communities organize around what does our FAC work look like? What are we working on? What kind of partnerships are we engaging in these different elements of fire adapted communities? And that really is kind of the central model that FACnet uses. An important thing to note is FACnet, Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network, is not the same as FAC as the general concept. FACnet helps to steward and move this work forward, but you don't have to be part of the Fire Adapted Communities Network to organize or work on fire adapted communities as a concept. I wanted to briefly talk about the audience that we serve at FACnet. So we really do work with the practitioner level. So groups like Project Wildfire, Deschutes County Office of Emergency Management, or local fire departments. We work with the people who are trying to kind of catalyze and organize don't always necessarily work with the HOA leaders or the FireWise leaders. That's usually what our network members, that's who they're working with in their own community. So we connect with the practitioners who are trying to kind of netweave and connect local groups and local networks within their own places. Again, there's some wiggle room there, but wanted to make sure to highlight kind of the difference of the types of network members that we have. I think one of the things that we've really tried to do within the network, and something that I think Project Wildfire has done really well over the years, is think about creative partnerships and who is engaged in the conversation around wildfire in your community. And throughout my presentation, I've interspersed a couple quotes that I've pulled from various evaluations that mostly Ed and Allison, maybe some from Boone, have given us throughout the years, because I thought it might be nice to hear some of their voices reflected in this. Lost my train of thought there. Yeah, so anyway, it's been really great to see Project Wildfire expand who they're engaging with and how you engage with different folks from the business community or public health or other folks who may have not traditionally seen themselves having a seat in the wildfire space. So that's enough about our history. We're going to go all the way back to spring 2014 and talk a little bit about Project Wildfire and your role in the network over the years, because it's been a really important partnership. Project Wildfire was one of the first network members. I actually went back and looked at some of the original applications, and in spring of 2014, Project Wildfire joined FACnet as one of the kind of original core, what we used to call core members. In your application, why you wanted to join the network, I think, is really kind of emblematic of what we are as a network. You stated that you wanted to share lessons learned and past successes. You wanted to learn from others and get unique approaches to working in the wildland urban interface. And you wanted to understand that you understood that fire adapted communities was evolving as a framework and wanted to engage in that conversation. And I think that your coordinators throughout the years have done a really wonderful job of doing all of those things, both listening and learning and contributing to the definition of what fire adapted communities work looks like. Um, from the get-go, folks jumped right in to participate in the network and share lessons learned. This was an example of kind of a story telling fact sheet that they gave to us for one of our early workshops. And it included some discussion about some of your partners, what some of the lessons that you had from the Two Bulls fire were, and what you were hoping to get out of the network and what some of your topics of interest were. And back then, a lot of it was around community wildfire protection plan development, connecting fire-wise communities, sharing the lessons from Fire Free. And from the very early days, the actual model of Project Wildfire was something that a lot of other folks around the country were really interested in learning about. From kind of the 2016 years, there was this effort in starting to kind of network and engage in the region. And we hosted a series of learning exchanges in 2016 to engage folks from Project Wildfire, Ashland, Oregon, and communities in Washington to talk about things like how you're disposing of community chipping day chips, how you're connecting your fire-wise communities, how you're thinking about pre-planning for post-fire recovery. Those are some of the topics at the time that were really coming up. And in evacuation as well. So Project Wildfire actually hosted one of the site visits in 2016 and shared a lot about the work that you all were doing in Deschutes County, which was really great. And those relationships that were developed in those kind of earlier years of the network have carried on, and Corinne still participates in one of our Pacific Northwest pod groups calls to kind of continue that sharing and learning throughout the years. I selected a photo from, I think this was from Boone from 2020, because I wanted to touch on the fact that over the years, FACNet has had funding to support participation in the network, and that model has shifted over the years. But if you looked backwards or talked to folks that had been engaged from the beginning, one of the elements that they would probably remember is our sub-award, our work planning with Project Wildfire, that I think was brought to this group actually to talk about sort of what do you want to work on? What are we going to ask FACNet for this year? So we both supported things like participating in the learning exchanges to share information and peer networking. And then we also gave some on the ground project funds. And one of those things was the home protection class. And I shared some comments from some final reports that just, I think, kind of highlight that Deschutes County and Project Wildfire really has both been has both learned some things from the network, from others in the network, but also been somebody to go to. As you can see here, there's a quote that says, since Deschutes County acceptance into the network, we've had multiple organizations from the Pacific Northwest, California, Texas, and Montana request learning about the business model and structure of Project Wildfire and Fire Free as examples that they can draw from. So really from the early days, Project Wildfire has been a leader and an example of what this work can look like in different places. And then today, moving forward, things have really changed over the years. Obviously, Ed and Allison moved on. Boone was here for a little while. He's gone now. We're so fortunate to have Corinne. Corinne was able to join us at our in-person workshop back in 2023 in New Jersey, where she got to learn and connect with other practitioners around the country who are trying to advance this work. We heard from our Pacific Northwest network members that they wanted to revisit those learning exchanges and bring folks together again. And so we were able to host that in Ashland back in 2024, and Corinne was able to participate. We've also been able to engage Nathan with Deschutes OEM a little bit more over the years. He just gave an awesome presentation recently about the evacuation work that you're doing in the county to our geographical connecting pod that we call it. And so it's been great to have that connection with Deschutes County, even though our network model has changed over the year. As we started phasing out our work plans with the network and kind of changing how we did funding and how as our funding structure has changed as well, we don't do those work plans anymore, but we offer larger kind of opportunity funds to network members to apply for. And the goal with those is to continue to support innovation in place. If there's a project that you want to start, but you haven't had kind of seed money to try out, that's what we really hope a lot of our funds will be for, is to try new things in your place and figure out what will work or help amplify things that you've been trying to get off the ground. we've shifted away from that core member structure of just kind of 25 key communities, and now we've got 500 network members. And we kind of are trying to find that balance of still net weaving people together, even though we're operating in more of a virtual environment and able to travel a lot less in person, but trying to keep those relationships strong, because that's really how you get that peer-to-peer innovation and practice sharing, which has been such a central part of FACT Network's work. And yeah, so it's been great to continue this relationship with Project Wildfire over the years. And one of the things I'd love to talk about more after my last section is just to hear more about how FACTNet can continue to support Project Wildfire in Deschutes County moving forward. So just to close, a quick summary of kind of where FACTNet is right now with what we offer to practitioners and network members. I'll start with kind of our communications offering. So the first thing is we have an online community that's kind of it's a central way to share ideas and information, events, funding opportunities. It's almost like a social media platform, but it really is, it's focused on network offerings and the wildfire domain. So network members come here and they can ask questions, they can share wins. There's often great discussion around how people are hosting things like chipping days, or looking for examples of evacuation plans or CWPP models that people really like. So it really is designed to be an internal, like peer-to-peer sharing platform within our network, is one virtual way to get people connecting. FACTNet has always tried to amplify the stories and the successes and the lessons learned from our network members. If you go look at our website, you'll see stories from Ed and Allison and Boone from over the years sharing lessons learned from Deschutes County and elevating it up through our national platform. We've got thousands of subscribers that follow our network blogs, and we use this historically to help share with agency partners and decision makers lessons from the ground about what your needs are, what your wins are, what makes your jobs easier and harder, what kind of policy changes we want to, potentially advocate for, or say, hey, we need funding for this kind of work now. And then of course we have a social media presence as well. Both of those two things, the blog and our social media, is external. Anybody can access it. You don't have to be a network member, whereas the internal online community platform is for network members only. And then lastly, a core part of our work continues to be offering training and learning opportunities for network members. We still try to do things in person when we can and when we have the budget to help support people's travel, but oftentimes we have to do things virtually now. So, we try to make space for taking care of practitioners in this field. So for example, we have a practitioner wellbeing course that we offer every year for network members. We try to help amplify resources around funding. So whether that's writing grants or accessing philanthropy, or getting help managing federal grants, right, which can be a challenge for a lot of organizations that are new to receiving federal dollars. So we create a lot of funding and grants resources. We try to be really responsive to the needs of what our network members are doing on the ground. So an example of that is recently folks were really wanting to talk about volunteer management. How do you do volunteer management? What does that look like? What kind of funding or capacity support do you need? What does your coordinator need to do? How do you make that successful? So we hosted this volunteer management training online. All of these things are free and accessible for our network members. And sometimes we make them externally accessible as well. And then, like I said earlier, there hasn't traditionally or historically been a pathway into becoming a fire adapted community coordinator or WUBI coordinator, right? So one thing we've been trying to do is highlight and tell the stories of people who have those jobs now, to share about how did they get into this field, what skills and training do they feel like make them successful at their job, and help kind of have conversation about workforce capacity in this field and how to create enabling conditions to support kind of the next generation of fire adapted communities practitioners. And I wanted to end with this photo because a couple of years ago, my boss, Michelle, and I were doing some network evaluation work, and we were thinking about putting together a case study on one of our communities that we felt like had been a really amazing both participant and partner in the network. And Project Wildfire was who we were excited to kind of use as that case study. And so we did this kind of like crazed mapping scenario where we took all of these different documents and evaluations and input over the years, and mapped it all out. And we ended up going kind of a different direction with the case study, but it was a really awesome look back at all of the work that has been done by Project Wildfire over the years. And I wanted to just kind of close with that because I think it really just highlights what an awesome partner and how much we've learned from Project Wildfire over the years. I love this quote. I don't remember if this was from Boone or from Allison. I can't remember the exact transition year, but I thought this was a really good highlight of what Project Wildfire felt like they had learned from the networks over the years. So I'll just read that out really quickly. From an early investment in FactNet, we have now had an official recognized community response plan for smoke in the Bend area. FactNet, along with FLN's initial investments to convene a group of partners and develop coordinated messaging, led to a communication strategy and website that formed the central pillar of the community response plan. And the website had nearly 1 million page views in the past 12 months from people looking for information on prescribed and wildfire smoke and air quality. So anyway, that's all I have. I'd love to answer any questions or just have a discussion and take some notes down about how FactNet can continue to be a partner to Project Wildfire in Deschutes County. Yeah, just thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Emily. Excuse me. So does anyone have any questions?
Will you have this presentation on the site?
I can ask Emily to send it to me.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes, I'm happy to share.
Any questions online?
Emily, can you share what resources you provide that directly support the FactNet framework components?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. So let me just pull this up really quick. So there's 2 places to go for information, but I'll just start with the Fire Adapted Communities Network website. We have a couple different options right now for communities who are looking to work on FAC. The first is for folks that like this graphic and want to use that as just a printout, something that you can have discussion around, or you can even do it virtually. There is a link to the graphic and a facilitator's guide on how to use it for discussion within your community. Oh, I lost my chat. Hold on a second. Drop that in here for folks. Based on that, and based on some research from Travis Pavelio and some others, we also created the FAC Pathways tool. There's both a printed and an online version of it, but it's a way to kind of help have conversations using the FAC graphic as a framework, but with a little bit more tailored ideas and input based on research around community archetypes. So it's just like rural communities, working lands communities, that sort of thing. So that's available also online as a strategy tool as well. And then we have an older resource, which I've heard from folks is still relevant and can be a great thing to kind of check against CWPP development, but I will just give it with the caveat that it is a little bit older and we're currently working on updating it. So those are some places I would start. In general, for all kinds of components of the FAC wheel, we've got a lot of resources on our website. So for example, if you're working on community engagement, we've got some really great workbooks and printouts in here and information that you can just take and steal and use in your work. So that's all free and online. And then if you're looking for inspiration and stories about what this work looks like around the country, our network has a blog that comes out weekly, as I mentioned before. And the whole idea is to share examples of partnerships, lessons learned, fantastic failures, and promote kind of innovation of what this work can look like in place. We also do use it to announce new materials and new resources. So for example, we just released a Smoke Ready Communities graphic that's kind of modeled after the FACT framework. And created a bunch of tools to go along with it, such as community case studies and a facilitation guide for it as well. So there's a lot of information on the FACTNet website. And then there's also just fireadapted.org, which is all about unpacking and understanding the fire adapted communities framework. So there's a couple different graphics. There's one that talks about the what of a fire adapted community, the who, and the when. And then there are a bunch of different resources in here, all organized around these different topics. Also on this website is our Community Wildfire Protection Plan database, which has some example. We're actually in the middle of updating this right now, but we're pulling together examples of really good CWPPs with smoke chapters or post-fire recovery planning chapters, or really good examples of kind of different kinds of ways that you can categorize priority projects and that sort of thing. So we're pulling together different examples from around the country, and the researchers that we worked with on this map are actually updating this map as well. So this is kind of a sneak peek, but this is getting updated. But if you're working on CWPPs, it's a great tool. We also have a whole page dedicated to funding FACT work, where we've tried to keep a grants database up to date, and then just have some general grants readiness resources as well.
Yeah, hi, Emily. I think it's about 2015, did a podcast with FAC for Deschutes County, Project Wildfire. We did it on the 4-star program. But my question kind of directs me from what I've seen and worked with FAC as a Firewise advisor. There wasn't a lot of codes adopted back in 2014, 15 for communities for home protection. Are you seeing throughout the United States where more jurisdictions are adopting building codes within their communities to help protect their homes from wildfire?
That's a great question. I would say anecdotally, without looking at a comprehensive analysis on it, yes, that is kind of the push that people are trying to make. There's a big push right now in Colorado. For example, California has been a leader in that space as well. Yes, working on codes and ordinances is definitely something that's been expanding significantly. Not every place has the political appetite for it. There are obviously some challenges in kind of defining where those might take place and defining wildland urban interface, for example. But yes, that is one strategy that some communities are taking.
And do you have a resource for us to go to find what communities have actually adopted codes, such as their building codes, so we can work with them, find out how they got through the building code process with their state?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the folks that do kind of the most comprehensive work around that is one of our partners at Headwater Economics and the Community Planning Assistance for Wildfire group. I can drop a link to them in the chat. They would probably be the best place to go for examples. And they have a lot of actually highlights on their blog as well about with case studies and resources for communities working on codes and ordinances.
Yeah, I've talked with Doug Green and Kim.
Oh, great.
From Headwaters, and they've done some studies here in Central Oregon. But again, just seems that a lot of people talk about it, but we haven't got there yet. And really, that is the solution.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll write that down as a peer exchange topic. So adopting codes and ordinances, moving beyond just talking about it. I see a question in the chat from Ariel. Great to see you as well. Can you please share a little bit about how FactNet will be involved in the event next year in Stevenson, Washington, adapting together, shaping the future of fire in the Northwest, and what you're excited about with the event? Yeah, great. So I am working with EJ and Carrie from OSU to support them in developing this workshop that's called Adapting Together, Shaping the Future of Fire in the Northwest. FactNet's role really is just to help with agenda support and bringing ideas to the table for who to invite and facilitating some sessions. So we're a partner in the workshop, and my goal is to really highlight some of the most innovative practices that we're seeing right now and host some really good discussions around it. So the goal for the workshop is to be interactive, to be visioning. Of course, we want to do some learning and hear some presentations from people who are doing some really cool work. But what I'm most excited about is the planning team is really invested in creating an engaging workshop that tries to bring together the voices of all of the participants in the room through creative facilitation styles. So I'm excited about that. I think it's going to be a really fun event. I love that it's regional in focus, so there can be some cross-state learning, but that is a little bit targeted to kind of the Northwest region. So that's what I'm most excited about.
Any other questions for Emily?
Emily, it's Kevin Moriarty, County Forester. Thanks for your presentation today. I just had a question or two on CWPPs and, now that we're, I guess probably 20 years into having CWPPs and writing them, and it sounds like most of the Western United States is drafted CWPP in some form. How do you see the future of that? Do you see a change in how that's actually that guiding document actually is established in a community, or do you see it similar to what we've done for the last like 20 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am really excited about from what I've seen from more recent CWPPs. I've been excited by the Community Wildfire Defense Grant funds because I think it's really amped up the people that are revisiting plans that are like 10 years old. And there's been some really great like visioning and leadership about the role of a community wildfire protection plan and the process. I am definitely one of those people who thinks the process of creating the CWPP is almost just as valuable as the plan because of the opportunity to bring the partners in the community into that process. But some of the things that I really like about some of the newer plans that I've been seeing is getting a little bit getting creative about how they define their wildfire risk and sort of what areas it touches in their community, and then also what topics they're addressing. So I'm starting to see more plans that are trying to crosswalk like community smoke response plans, or they're trying to at least have a chapter or an acknowledgement around addressing smoke in their community. There's a lot more plans thinking about pre-fire planning for recovery. So how do we start working on recovery before we even need it? It's heartening to see more communities trying to address that in their pre-planning. So that's been great. And then the other thing that I've seen as a trend that folks are doing really well is thinking about ways to make it more engaging and more of a living document so that folks can see how it's not just a plan sitting on a shelf, but something that's actively being worked on. So some communities use like an ArcGIS dashboard that shows all of their priority actions and they can check them off and the community can see how you're actually addressing those things. People are creating like executive summaries or chapters that are specifically geared towards residents to say, hey, your neighborhood was listed as a priority area that we want to do mitigation work. Here's what that means for you, and share that kind of like executive summary that's specifically related to that community that's impacted or addressed in the plan. So I guess to answer your question, yes, I've seen a lot of growth in how CWPPs are being done. There are some states that are trying to advance state-specific guidance or state-specific templates. So that's kind of becoming a theme as well. And the best CWPPs I'm seeing are ones that have a really thoughtful engagement process throughout the planning process itself, and then also think about how to make it a living document after the fact as well. So I'm heartened by the progression I've seen with CWPPs, and I'll actually drop a link in the chat to a series that we just hosted all about what we called CWPPs 2.0, and it talks about some of those specific chapters that we were really excited about, such as post-fire planning and smoke preparedness, and give some examples as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was thinking the same thing, at least brainstorming that, you know, this stagnant document might be a little better served online in a dashboard or something dynamic that is easy to access and can regularly be updated and, you know, engaged with. So if you have any examples of any counties or anyone doing that, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I can pull together some examples for you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dean. I see your hand raised.
Yes, right in that same vein with the CWPPs, at least here we've been, you know, we renew them about every 5 years and go over them. But what I've noticed is the action plan needs input from the communities, and also it seems like it would be really valuable to be able to tweak or adjust that action plan over that 5-year period, rather than just come up with a statement and then revisit it in another 5 years.
Yeah, that's I think that's kind of one of the goals of having like an online or platform that's somehow more engaging, as to show and to reflect back at the community, hey, here were the action plans that we targeted, here's what we've been able to get funding for and accomplish, here's what's on deck. And then really kind of highlights how you're being responsive to what's been identified in your plan. But I think that brings up a great point is, you know, when you create your action plan, even if you don't have something like an ArcGIS dashboard, how are you creating accountability within your community to kind of track progress in between those 5-year planning updates, which, by the way, is awesome that they're being done every 5 years. There are some places that wait 10 plus years to update their CWPP. So that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe something like every year at least, revisit it and find out what progress is being made and what changes need to be addressed.
Yeah, and it totally depends on the scale of your CWPP too. Some people are working on a fire district level where something like that might be a little bit easier. Some folks are working on a county level. And there's, other different scales that folks have identified as well, where, crosswalking plans can make things a little bit more messy sometimes with the different planning cycles, but definitely something to consider.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. I guess I'll just pop, but I have a meeting at noon Eastern time, so I have maybe about 10 more minutes, but I'd love to hear, are there any topics kind of along that vein of sort of adopting codes, moving beyond just talking about it, but what does that look like in practice? Are there any other topics that are of interest to Project Wildfire in Deschutes County right now that we should take into account and try to be responsive to?
I think Project Wildfire, in general, there's been a lot of discussion about insurance industry. And then also just like fire-wise, recognize homes and communities, and how like if insurance is going to be like recognizing that at all. I mean, as of now, they really aren't, but there's been a lot of discussion about that. Another thing that Project Wildfire discusses often is like evacuation. And you know, in our pod, we just did 2 meetings, about evacuation, so that was pretty good, sorry, I'm losing my voice. And then Kevin, you.
Yeah, I mean, I would just second that. I think, you know, what would be really good, and we did have a recent bill passed through legislation that kind of starting to look at that of, you know, engaging the insurance industry with our fire protection agencies. But really just some kind of accreditation program, community scale accreditation program that can really help with that reduced premium, or at least a different look at how insurance companies look at, you know, a community from a risk perspective. That really seems to be the path we need to move forward. We can't really use data, I'd say per se, like satellite imagery or anything to ultimately define risk per house. And you know, I think you need to have a little more on the ground accreditation type process for that.
Yeah, yep, that's great. Thanks, Kevin. That's been a topic of conversation in a number of our state networks. Our folks in Montana actually just hosted a conversation with the insurance commissioner for the state to try to understand, you know, kind of what's the trend, what are we seeing. I have a question because I can't remember off the top of my head, but is Oregon participating in the IBHS wildfire prepared homes effort?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
okay.
I believe it's in the infancy right now.
Infancy, okay.
Explain what that is, I'm, relatively new, so.
I guess I'll go for it, but it's IBHS, it's essentially a program that they're starting to, they're starting to come up with an accreditation program, essentially. Yeah, but it's.
Yeah.
It hasn't really gone far, at least in Oregon. I think there's a couple communities that they're demoing right now to be in that program, in that process, but that's what it would be geared towards, is some kind of accreditation that they're saying that you're how are they framing that again? It's
It is an accreditation. It's a certification, and there's like 2 different levels. There's like base and plus or something like that. And I know that most of their pilot communities, I want to say, have been in California, and they've just expanded to Colorado as well. But I couldn't remember if they had taken on any pilot communities in Oregon or not. You know, one thing, this is a great kind of conversation, because one of the things I've heard from communities that we've worked with over the years is like, there's always something new to adopt, right? It's like Firewise, and now there's FAC, and now there's wildfire prepared homes, and like, what do we do? Where do we go? And I think that's such a valid topic of conversation. And one of the things that we try to do within FACnet is understand just what are the different options. Not everything is going to work in the same place, right? Like, you don't have to adopt all of the things, but maybe there's something that's going to make more sense in your place. So I'm curious to see what comes out with wildfire prepared homes and that designation. And I know they're trying to partner with the insurance industries to be part of that. So I'm curious how that program itself works. And I'll just note that Craig Lindbergh shared something from WPAC in the chat as well.
Audie, are you familiar with the Fortify program? No. So the wildfire prepared home standard is similar to a Fortify home standard, which is being used, say, in Florida. It's an IBHS program to harden homes against hurricanes. And it speaks to building codes and things like that. And so wildfire prepared home is similar, speaking to building codes, defensible space for wildfire.
What do those initials stand for?
WPH.
No, the IBHS.
Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety.
I just had a quick one. This applies to Deschutes County, but have you heard of any programs, any funding for an alternative site for debris You know, I spend a lot of my day, I'm a contractor, so I spend a lot of my day hauling brush to and from the dump. And I know that in, I think, 2027, they're trying to find a new site to take all this stuff. So I was just curious if you've heard any kind of alternative ideas for even private land being turned into a landfill for hazardous fuel and things like that.
That's a great question, and it's a continuous battle for many communities about what to do with all of the debris that is created from mitigation on private property. A lot of the conversation that I've seen around alternatives to using a landfill site is around things like on-site biochar or pile burning works. It's not about creating new landfill sites. I don't know of anything off the top of my head funding wise, unfortunately. I will say I'm living in an area that's been highly impacted by Hurricane Helene, and I'm volunteering with the fire department here. And part of the issue is going to be debris removal. So I'm expecting some pretty significant lessons learned around what to do with all of that debris, because I don't know how many, it's like something like 30% of our tree cover or something is down in the region. So a huge issue here, and I would be happy to extend any lessons learned that we have in this region.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We did apply, our recent grant, we applied for community wildfire defense grant down in the Pine area. We did apply for an air curtain burner in that grant as well. And so it is an alternative to taking material to the landfill, and that's something we're thinking about. I think the scale of that is,
Yeah.
I think you're really gonna tip the scale really of taking it to the landfill, but we will start small and pilot, and hopefully we can scale up. And my ultimate goal would have an air curtain burner at every transfer station in Bill in the county. That would be helpful, but we're not there yet.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's exactly one of the issues is the economies of scale. But that's cool. Did that get funded, or no? We're still waiting on round 3.
Yeah, we're still waiting.
Yeah. Okay. Dean, did you have another question or thought, or is your hand just still up from earlier? Sorry.
For Deschutes County, but I think it might also apply to many other areas. Because it's been prominent in the news over the last couple of years, the urban and suburban type of fires. Oftentimes they seem to be weather events, but people think of wildfire as being like forest related, or then maybe it moves into the community or something, but it can even start in the community, and if it's dry and there's a lot of wind, there can be disastrous results. And so I think maybe take the opportunity to create more awareness of the risks that people have in urban and suburban areas, one. Then the other thing is I live in South Deschutes County, and there are a lot of people that are not living in communities that have an organization. They have no homeowners association. Sometimes they have a road district that you can communicate through, but there are huge areas where I'm sure that people would like to have mitigation, but they're not working with each other. And it's been really hard to get traction. I mean, we've been Upper Deschutes River communities. We came up with a CWPP 20 years ago, and there are still communities that are really hard to get traction in. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. To the point around urban and suburban fires, yeah. So I mentioned it during my introduction. I used to live in Boulder, Colorado. So I worked the Marshall Fire event as a staff at the Emergency Operations Center. And I invited on a recent pod call that Corinne just mentioned, we were talking about evacuation, our director for emergency management from Boulder County, because they're working on urban conflagration planning and putting that alongside their evacuation planning. And Corinne, I actually just shared out that material from the notes that Mike was talking about. And there might be sections of that might be interesting to Project Wildfire or Nathan to have conversations around, what does urban conflagration planning look like in these settings? So I think that's a super critical conversation. A lot of communities are starting to investigate what that looks like. What does temporary refuge areas planning looks like? And Ashland, Oregon actually is doing some really cool LiDAR modeling around evacuation routes and thinking about temporary refuge areas around that vein as well. So super important topic of conversation. And then the conversation around sort of communities without organizing bodies for certain neighborhoods. One thing we've seen be a pretty successful model in some communities like that is neighborhood ambassadors. And I can share a link to that, but we're actually in the process, we're about to put out a video that features some lessons learned from the greater Yellowstone ecosystem area. And there's a lot of communities that have kind of large private land owner situations or ranches where communities are coming together to help each other with mitigation work, even if there isn't necessarily an organizing body for their HOA. So they're using this neighborhood ambassador model to help create volunteer opportunities and community-wide mitigation work on different private property like opportunities without having kind of a formal organizing body. So I can share a little bit more about that in the chat as well. Because that can definitely be a challenge. Here we go. Well, Corinne, yeah, thank you. I'm so sorry, folks. I have to hop off in just a second for my next meeting, but thank you again so much for inviting me to be here and share. Really enjoyed working with Project Wildfire in Deschutes County over the years. Really appreciate your partnership and your investment in the network over the years as well. So Corinne and Kevin, I look forward to hearing from you again soon. I'll share the PowerPoint with you, and please do feel free to follow up with me if anybody has additional questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. It was awesome to have you.
Thank you.
Emily.
I really enjoy working with Emily, and the fact that every time I, go on to one of our pod calls or join them at a conference, I just learned so much. Pretty much everyone that's involved, like she was saying, is kind of in similar positions as I am in different parts of like for mostly the Pacific Northwest, but I have gone to one of their like more national conferences, and we just learned so much from each other. It's been really awesome to be a part of their network. So really excited that Emily was able to join us today. All right, so we can go ahead and move on to a roundtable discussion. So I don't know, do you want to get us started? I think you started.
Yeah, my name's Grant. I own Grantland Management Services in Bend, so we've been just doing all kinds of stuff really. A lot of brush clearing, a lot of dead limbing on private property. Also the 1/8" mesh on vents is a big deal for insurance. Also, it's been getting even to the point where they want the 8" covering open eaves of roofs, which is not that fun to install, but I mean, that's kind of like a strip of that stuff going across the whole roof now, which so that's been going on. And yeah, just different fire resistant, drought tolerant plants and a lot of rock. So that's what I do all day. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not sure if this belongs here or at Thursday's meeting, but since we have time, I'll launch into it. Something I was happy about is I talked to a landscaper who said, now, what is this about clearing 5 feet from your home? I'm so busy doing that. And that was refreshing. And I was able to tell her a few things about that. So that's good. Another thing that I was impressed with at our home tour of homes was there's a area called Westgate, way west of town, and their homes are required to be built in a hardened way. And the one I visited was pretty amazing. So that was kind of cool. And that got me to thinking of, and I hate to bring up ideas because then all of a sudden you're responsible for implementing it, but it caused me to think of, wouldn't it be fun if we had a tour of hardened homes? And then I thought, well, that's kind of big. So maybe it would be realistic to latch on to the one that COBA does once a year in July, just to talk to somebody about, could you have one? And then really chat it up. And what would be ideal is to have one like in Sisters or Redmond, Lapine, certainly then. So that might be something to latch onto and to promote. So there's an idea.
When we designed the tree farm with Brooks Resources, it was probably the leading in the United States. Westgate developed some of their same codes.
I see.
But build on a greater than 20%. All the NFPA codes are in place. One thing I found out that traveling across the United States, visiting these different states and Firewise sites, they said, yeah, we changed the building code to all the new standards. But one thing they left out was sprinkling homes. And that's one thing that Brooks Resources agreed to, and that was doing internal sprinkler systems inside the homes. Fire resistant siding, fire resistant roofing, fire resistant clamps, going out 30 feet, wood piles have to be covered. So we also widen all the roads. The cul-de-sacs are widened. They have a fire hydrant system, a good escape plan, and but the other codes that we're seeing across the United States, this is the first thing they take out. They take out fire sprinkler systems. A lot of times they take out the home hardening siding. They leave in within their code, they talk about fire resisting plants, the 5 feet, Firewise standards. And that's why it's important for me to find out who's successful out there, you know, and that's something we see in the Firewise sites when we talking with firefighters. They said we go into the Firewise sites and there might be only 2 homes out of 50 homes that actually are doing anything, but yet they're a Firewise site or Firewise community. And that doesn't really tell much to a firefighter going into these communities. What they want to see is how successful is that? Is it 90%? Is it 100%? Because then they can say, hey, this community is good. We can use less fire apparatus in those communities to really helps protect the firefighters. But I think that's something that the whole Firewise program is a social program and it gets people talking. But I think it's the insurance industry that's probably going to be our future planner for all of this, because they're not going to insure you unless you do these things. And so if you don't have an insurance policy, and again, you have a mortgage on the house, what are you going to do? So I think that's the direction things are going with insurance, and I think they're the ones. We saw that in the early 1980s with wood stoves. They just said they were not going to insure you if you had a wood stove inside your home unless it was suspected by a accredited person, which is usually the fire department. So we were out doing wood stove safety inspections and denying a lot of them, where Bend actually created an ordinance where they had to remove the wood stoves. So when they sold their house, that program went away, but it was an ordinance within the city of Bend. So, you know, that's where I think things are probably going to go in the future. If you want to get insurance, if you want to sell your home, it's going to have defensible space. It may have to have hardened siding. We already have an ordinance on the books, the building codes through Deschutes County with all cities and Deschutes County that says you cannot put a flammable roof on any home. And that came out in about 1999, 2000 were the first ones in the state. So we just need to take that a step further with hardening the home on siding, dual pane, or hardening windows, landscaping, and then you have to worry about the maintenance. You know, things do grow back. So who's out there every few years making sure that their home is still dependable. And that's why we started the 4-star program, because we went out every 5 years to actually look at those communities and see if they're doing better or if they're not doing anything. Then we change the rating on their sign, their Firewise sign. Might be something that we look at in the future.
So some of us have been talking with Central Oregon Builders Association and the incoming president of COBA is Grayson Graham. And he indicated that the showcase home next year will be in Discovery West. And that they will be building it to as a Firewise example. So that's in the works for next year. And there's also been talk, so I don't know, I really haven't really shared this with all of you guys, but I'm also a member of the Central Oregon Master Gardeners Association. And the gardeners tour is always has a Firewise, garden on the tour, and will continue to do so. And the Central Oregon Master Gardeners Association understands that Firewise education is growing in importance, and so they're having talks about how to become a little bit more strategic in that area as well. So.
Shoots County Fire District 2 is in their new budget year, and so we have a new pot of money for grants within Fire District number 2 for homeowners or HOA to come to us and apply for a fire-free Firewise grant. Usually we put out about $2,000 per community. So we do about 5-6 communities per year. We already have one that is applied for this year, and so I'll try to get that to you in the newsletter, and just so people know that come to us and apply for that. It's a matching grant, so sweat equity at Firewise hour rate can match their grant pretty easily, just with 50 community hours or 100 community hours of work. So it's a good program.
So as part of Summit West Neighborhood District, we have 4 communities that just became recognized as Firewise USA program participants. And we've got another one that's pending. We have 2 more communities that have their risk assessments scheduled in September, and a couple more that are trying to organize and recruit.
How large are those sites? I mean, for Firewise site?
That's a great question. They vary quite a bit. So we have 4 HOAs that just were, no, we have 3 HOAs that were just approved, and then 1 non-HOA or community that was approved. That community is more like 30. The largest HOA community is about 116. So that's the range. Yeah.
You'll have far more success if you work with smaller ones, where
Right.
you don't get to that
Yeah.
percent.
Well, going back to Dean's comment about how do you get individuals to come together and organize? I guess, what we found in the Summit West Neighborhood District is it takes a lot of personal outreach. And you need to find the spark plug within each particular neighborhood. And so that's how it's grown.
Yeah, that was, Sundance was the first community in Deschutes County without an HOA to earn Firewise recognition. At the time, I was the spark plug, and I worked with And, one of the things that helped is that, Boone worked with other county staff to get a list of all the property owners within the neighborhood. And help us with funding to send a letter to every, property owner in Sundance, there are 180 properties or so, sharing information about our community meetings so that then we could draw, because otherwise, it's 3 acres plus, walking that neighborhood, which I've done most of the last 6 years. It's pretty time consuming. And even when you walk it, so many of them are gated and fenced and you can't, it's not, you're not supposed to leave anything in mailboxes. So it's hard to reach some of those property owners without, knowing their address and being mailed.
Well, that's,
And since then, it's just been a relentless every year, continuing to do that outreach and then doing projects that people can actually see. And that sparks interest. We'll remember 1 year to the next, go, oh, I should do that this year. So we've seen steadily for 6 years or so. It's more.
Well, a huge difference between a rural community like what you're in or what Dean is in. When it is hard to walk the neighborhood, it's too big, there aren't roads. But fortunately, where we are, we do, we have that capacity, so things are close, so it is a little bit easier to organize. It's definitely easier to organize in HOA communities. We have, versus a non-HOA community, the non-HOA community that organized already had, a communication mechanism and so forth, so.
One of the issues we ran into that, I don't think a lot of people have thought about is they don't work with HOAs before.
Mhm.
You don't have a bank account. Like how do you open a bank account for a neighborhood that has no HOA or no official organizations? One of the
Right.
property owners
Yeah,
had to create
absolutely.
a LLC or something.
Yeah.
Bank account, so accept.
I can address that just a little bit. If there's a connection, an organization that's a 501c3 can like sponsor or what's the word for it? What's that?
They can be a fiscal sponsor.
They can be a fiscal sponsor for a neighborhood that doesn't have that kind of designation, and that can make it work sometimes. So for instance, I think Soil and Water could fiscally sponsor communities in the Upper Chutes River organization that I'm in. We've done that more than once. So that's a possibility. And then Gary, I think, mentioned the 4-star program a couple times, and I don't know if anybody even remembers that, but I thought that was a great idea, but it never really happened because it was initiated here, and Firewise is a nationwide type of thing. But I recall going around with Boone Zimmerly and Allison Green to reassess a couple of neighborhoods, Fall River Estates and Spring River, and maybe 10 or 15 years after they had become Firewise. And both of these neighborhoods had actually lost ground in the meantime. So there's a real importance to doing continuous work in the communities and keep advancing, because just because you have the sign that says it's a Firewise community doesn't really give you an accurate idea of like how mitigated the situation is. Thanks.
Did anyone online have anything to share for roundtable before we wrap up? right. Well, if no one else has anything for roundtable, we can just wrap up early. Thank you everyone for being here today, for the discussion. It's great. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Caroline.
you. Yeah.